Internet, my name is Jay and welcome to True Fan Forum. Now, with Halloween being just around the corner, I thought I'd try to squeeze in a few horror-related videos, and in this video, I want to talk about one of my absolute favorite horror writers, Dean Koontz. Now, since beginning his writing career in the 1960s, Mr. Koontz has written over 100 various books, short stories, novellas, and whatnot. Has had, I think, over a dozen of his paperbacks and hardbacks, respectively, go on to become bestsellers, and he has sold over 400 million copies of his works. Now, I've been a fan of Mr. Koontz since high school, when I happened to check out the book Strangers from my high school library, and this book made me an instant fan. And ever since, I've gone on to read not all, but quite a few of his works, and honestly, folks, I have thoroughly enjoyed each and every one of them. They've been so much fun. For me, anyway, there hasn't been a dud yet. Now, having read so many of his books, there's a few things I want to touch on that I really enjoy. First off, I've noticed that Mr. Koontz has a certain geographical preference to his stories. By that, I mean he really seems to enjoy setting most of his stories either somewhere in California or somewhere along the West Coast. Kind of like how Stephen King will set a lot of his stories in Maine or somewhere in the East Coast area. And Mr. Koontz writes about the West Coast area in such wonderful detail that I just feel like I've been there myself, even though I never have been. But one of the things I absolutely love about his stories are his characters. And Mr. Koontz has this amazing ability to write these just absolutely enthralling characters. You know, the kind of characters that you just can't help but fall in love with and root for and just want to see triumph over whatever dangers and challenges they come across. And personally, what I really love about his characters is that they're just so decent. You know, they're such people of compassion and bravery and honor. You know, the kind of people that will not only fight for themselves, but fight and even give their own lives for the people around them, for the people they care about the most. Now, I'm not trying to say that his characters are, overly perfect. They're not. I mean, they have their flaws and their weaknesses and their moments of doubt, but all that just makes them complex and feel human and just adds to their overall appeal. If they were too perfect or goody-goody, they'd just be really boring to read. But again, they're really complex and, as I said, appealing. Another thing about a lot of his characters that I love is that a lot of his characters have a certain quirkiness about them, There's something about them that adds levity and fun to the stories, but not in a way that it takes away from the overall tension or drama of the stories. It's a good balance that I really admire. For example, I think a good example of mine of quirky characters would be the ones found in the Odd Thomas series of books, chief among them being the titular hero of the series, Odd Thomas, a ghost-seeing short-order cook from a tiny town in California driven to right injustices. I mean, you want to talk quirky? How's this? Odd is his actual legal first name. Thomas is his last. I mean, his parents claim that his name was supposed to be Todd, but a nurse or someone at the hospital made a mistake on the paperwork. But they've never tried to change the paperwork, nor if they called him anything but Odd. But, once you get to know his parents, you realize that they are hardly the most reliable of sources. But again, I just finding a character whose name is literally Odd to be quite quirky. Another thing about Mr. Koontz's work that I love is that there's variety in them. Even though his works can be classified as horror or suspense thrillers, there's more elements to that in his works. Some stories are supernatural, others are sci-fi, and some are the kind of good old-fashioned psychological thrillers where the villains are evil and deadly, but in the end, quite human. And to me, I think those are some of the best villains because they feel like they're real, like they could actually exist in the real world. And when I think about serial killers, people like that actually do exist in the real world, so that's frightening. So anyway, I love all that because it adds, like I said, variety to his stories. It gives a feeling of, depth. It's not just the same sort of story retold over and over and over again. And with over 100 various works, that's a good thing, you know. So I love the fact that Mr. Koontz is willing to play and explore and experiment and, you know, tell different types of stories within the sort of umbrella of a specific genre. It really does show that that even in a particular genre, you can do so much with it. And I love that. It's an inspiration to me as a wannabe writer. Now, if I do have one criticism of some of his stories, is that I feel some of his stories have an abrupt ending. And by that I mean, you know, you're reading along, you're noticing you're running out of pages, and you're like, oh my gosh, the story hasn't been resolved yet. What's going to happen? How's the conflict going to end? And boom, the conflict ends, and that's it, the end. Now, for me as a reader, I kind of like epilogues or denouement, just a little bit of something with the characters after the conflict's over, so we can get an idea of what their lives are going to be from there on in, you know. I guess it just stems from the fact that I love his characters so much. I'm so captivated by them. I want more. I want to spend as much time with them as possible. Now, not all of his stories are abrupt. Some of his stories have such wonderful endings that I close the book and just sort of go, ah, that was great. That was wonderful. I feel really fulfilled. So again, that's my only major criticism. Some of his stories feel a bit abrupt, but that's just coming from a place where I just love his characters and I want to spend more time with them. Now, if you're not a fan of Dean Koontz, but you're interested, please allow me to share with you a few of my favorites works and works that I feel just are really great examples of his style and what he brings to the table. There's, of course, Strangers. There's Whispers, Phantoms, The Dark Place, From the Corner of His Eye, Winter Moon, the short story collection Strange Highways, the Odd Thomas series. I mean, there's just so many books, but again, those are just a few of my personal favorites, books that I've loved, and they have stuck with me for even though years after I've read them. Well, folks, I guess to sum everything up, I love Dean Koontz. He's one of my favorite writers of all time, not just in horror, but just in general. I love his work, I love his characters, and I want to keep reading more and more, and maybe, who knows, maybe read everything he's written, which is a big task. So folks, tell me, what do you think? Do you have a personal favorite of his work? Have you even heard of Dean Koontz? Please, feel free to comment below, and while you're at it, like and share and subscribe and do all that stuff that helps a small YouTuber like me grow and expand his channel and reach more people. I would greatly appreciate it. So, thanks folks, and I'll see you next time.